Okay. Wayne LaPierre is speaking live in Nevada. We're going to go to that now.
Yesterday, in his second inaugural address, President Barack Obama quoted the Declaration of Independence, and he talked about unalienable rights. I would argue that his words make a mockery of both. I'd like to talk to you about one line near the end of President Obama's speech, where he said, quote, "We cannot mistake absolutism for principle." Let me quote the President again. "We cannot mistake absolutism for principle." So, what is this absolutism attacks? And what are the so-called principles that he wants us to settle for instead? Obama wants to turn the idea of absolutism into a dirty word, just another word for extremism. He wants you, all of you, and Americans throughout all of this country to accept the idea of principles as he sees fit. It's a way of redefining words so that common sense is turned upside down and that nobody knows the difference. Think about it for just a minute. As families, when we're broke and all of our credit cards are maxed out, we're all forced to tighten our belts. But when government is broke and our bond rating is tumbling and the president wants programs, borrowing more money is supposed to be principled. And anybody who questions that is a no-good absolutist, Obama code for extremist. We as gun owners face that same kind of false ultimatum. We're told that to stop insane killers, we must accept less freedom, less than the criminal class, and the political elites, less than they keep for themselves. We're told that limits on magazine capacity or bans on 100-year-old firearm technology, bans that only will affect lawful people, will somehow make us safer. We're told that wanting the same technology that the criminals and our elites are protected by for themselves is a form of absolutism, and that accepting less freedom and protection for ourselves is the only principled way to live. Barack Obama is saying that the only principled way to make children safe is to make lawful citizens less safe and violent criminals more safe. That's what it amounts to. Criminals couldn't care less about Barack Obama's so-called principles. They don't have principles. That's why they're called criminals. You all know that. Obama wants you to believe that putting the federal government right in the middle of every firearms transaction, except those between criminals, will somehow make us all safer. That means forcing law-abiding people to fork over excessive fees to exercise their rights, forcing parents to fill out forms to leave a family heirloom to a loved one, standing in line and filling out a bunch of bureaucratic paperwork just so a grandfather can give a grandson a Christmas gift. He wants to put every private, personal firearms transaction right under the thumb of the federal government. And he wants to keep all of those names in a massive federal registry. There's only two reasons for a federal list on gun owners: to either tax them or take them. It's the only reason. And anyone who says that's excessive, President Obama says, you're an absolutist. He doesn't understand you. He doesn't agree with the freedoms that all of you cherish, and Americans all over this great land cherish in their hearts. If the only way he can force you to give them up is through scorn and ridicule, believe me, he's more than willing to do it, even as he claims the moral high ground. He said it yesterday. In the very same sentence that Obama talked about absolutism versus principle, he also scolded his critics. He called it. He's more than willing to demonize his opponents, silence his critics, and slur the NRA. In the words of Senator Charles Schumer, as an extremist fringe group. And look how he demonizes the Republicans in Congress. When Barack Obama says we cannot mistake absolutism for principle, what he's saying is that precision and clarity and exactness in language and law should be abandoned in favor of his nebulous, undefined principles. I've got news for the President. Absolutes do exist. Words do have specific meaning in language and in law. It's the basis of all civilization. It's why our laws are written down, so the letter of the law carries the force of the law. That's why our Bill of Rights was written into law, to ensure that fundamental freedoms of a minority could never be denied by a majority. Those are the principles we call unalienable rights. Without those absolutes, protections, democracy decays into nothing more than two wolves and one lamb voting on, well, who to eat for lunch. I urge our President to use caution when attacking clearly defined absolutes in favor of his principles. Mr. President, just because you wish words meant something other than what they mean.
Okay, that's enough of Wayne LaPierre for now. With me, E.J. Dionne, Karen Finney, Frank Smythe, who's been following the NRA quite closely. I just want to now play exactly what the president said yesterday that has Wayne LaPierre so upset. This statement the president made about don't mistake absolutism for principle. Let's listen to that.
We cannot mistake absolutism for principle, or substitute spectacle for politics, or treat name-calling as reasoned debate. We must act. We must act knowing that our work will be imperfect. We must act knowing that today's victories will be only partial, and that it will be up to those who stand here in 4 years, and 40 years, and 400 years hence to advance the timeless spirit once conferred to us in a spare Philadelphia hall.
E.J. Dionne, of course, that's just an intolerable statement that the president made. I don't see how the NRA could waited as long as they did to come out against it.
You know, he said Obama wants to turn absolutism into a dirty word. I thought absolutism already was a dirty word, and it didn't take President Obama to do it.
LaPierre said absolutism is another word for extremism, which, yes, in many instances it is.
Yes. Yeah. And so, you know, what I found odd about his talk is, first, this at least looked moderately more reasonable than that crazy outburst he gave right after Newtown. So somehow he's pulling back. But the second thing is, it's really tired NRA rhetoric where he says these laws will only affect lawful people. Well, the whole point of a background check is to keep guns out of the hands of lawless people, of criminals. So they're very tired arguments that they just keep making and making.
And Karen, they always say, you know, it won't stop every one of of these
Of course.
things. That's what the president is saying.
That's the absolutism that they like to say.
That line in there where the president says, we must act knowing that our work will be imperfect.
That's
we must act knowing that today's victories will only be partial.
And that's why what he was saying was so twisted, right? The absolutism, I think, that the president was speaking to was the idea that the NRA says, well, why do anything? That's not going to solve what happened at Newtown. Although, how about Friday, there was a white supremacist arrested with 18 AR-15s in a truck and amassed high-capacity magazines. Today, there was a shooting at a school in Texas, a community college. We're still learning the details, but the president has talked about gun safety and keeping guns out of the hands of people who should not have them. So we shouldn't try at all because we might not have been able to stop Newtown? No.
And just on that point, Justice Scalia agrees with Obama on this absolutist issue because Justice Scalia says that the Second Amendment allows the regulation of various kinds of firearms.
And Frank Smith, you've been watching Wayne LaPierre, the NRA, quite closely. I assume this is pretty much on track with what you would have expected after that inaugural address.
This is on track, but Wayne LaPierre has made a very calculated decision to try and co-opt the language and change the terms of the debate at a critical time. The National Rifle Association has an absolutist interpretation of the Second Amendment, something that I've used, the Washington Post used a week ago on Sunday in their description of their position on the Second Amendment. That is what most people would consider an extreme interpretation, an interpretation that would say that citizens have the right to have the same force of arms as police and the military, fully automatic weapons. That's the right of the Roberts Court, the Supreme Court, and the opinion written by Justice Scalia. It's the right of the Wall Street Journal editorial page.
And you maintain the goal of the NRA is for private individuals to be able to match law enforcement and even military in firepower.
The driving force of the NRA is that they believe they want to be insurrectionists in waiting, have the legal right to be heavily armed to fight a future tyrannical government, which if you listen to Ted Nugent, the NRA director, it's the Obama administration.
Yes. Yeah.
But if you listen to other Second Amendment activists, such as neo-Nazi organizations, it's what one of them called the Zionist-occupied government. So the NRA occupies a very dangerous space to the far right of the American political spectrum, where what white supremacist groups operate in the shadow of the NRA, and the real message is they have an absolutist agenda. It's what most people would call an extremist agenda. And rather than me called out on this, what I think LaPierre is attempting to do is change the terms of the debate in a preemptive strike.
What he did in that first few minutes, which was, I think, is all we probably need to hear. I mean, if he's just wrapping up there now. He said he managed to come out against the president's proposal for background checks for all firearms transactions. Never mind that, of course, all automotive transactions are also tracked by the government, and those include some heirlooms. There are some grandfathers giving away the 57 T-Bird to the granite, and the government has to, check the papers on those
but also, it's so insulting, this idea that we shouldn't have to fill out any kind of paperwork to have a gun, but we have to fill out all kinds of paperwork to vote. That seemed to be perfectly fine.
And in fact, we're trying to make it harder for people to vote.
And in some states, I have to have a vaginal probe before I can access a legal procedure, a legal medical procedure, and that seems to be okay. I mean, the hypocrisy of these arguments is outrageous.
We just want to keep track of whatever the grandfathers are giving that can kill people, like actually designed to kill human beings. If that's what you're bequeathing to people in your will, yeah, we want to keep track of that.
But, it was also interesting that he went after the background checks, because I think there is an excellent chance that Congress actually is going to close.
He knows that's
that
where the strongest
loophole.
support
He knows
is.
that's that and the ban on the big magazines. And so the fact that he's going there, I think, says he is worried that people who want saner gun regulations have actually gained ground on that.
And then, Frank, he says that the reason that the president wants to track all these transactions is so he will then know who all the gun owners are, so we can tax them or take them.
If you accept the premise that you could have a future tyrannical government, the first thing that the tyrannical government would do in the minds of the Second Amendment absolutists is come to gun owners' homes, seize their weapons, and then probably imprison them. That's inconceivable to most of us in this country, but this is the fantasy that NRA leaders and other Second Amendment activists are living with. Most gun owners would have no problem with gun registration, but if you are fearing the government, then the reason you don't want any gun registration is because it would give give Big Brother the opportunity to take
Do
away
these
your
people
guns.
register their cars? Are they? Do they like just not get license plates and stuff? What do they do?
Most of them register their cars. Most of them pay taxes.
The government can come and take those cars because they know where they are. They have their addresses.
But don't forget, too, as the NRA sort of whips up this hysteria, what happens? Gun sales go up. What does that mean? That means gun manufacturers make money. And the NRA has a direct, $1 program for with some of their gun manufacturers. So they get more money. So let's not forget that some of this comes back to commerce and following the dollars.
And their membership goes up. And